Welcome, Archaeo Deathlings, to Let's Talk Random Archaeology Episode 4 with myself, Professor Howard Williams.
And Afnan, hello.
Hello, everybody. And this time, having done 3 of these episodes exploring aspects of undergraduate archaeology degrees, we're into the crazy world of postgraduate taught degrees. And we're doing something different, aren't we, Afnan? Because we've got 2 special guests joining us.
Yeah.
So in addition to a convo with Afnan herself about her experiences of doing the MA at the University of Chester, her master's degree, we're going to talk to 2 other former MA students at the University of Chester, Canadian anthropologist background person, Willie Pohl, and heritage archaeology backgroundy person, Scott Bound from the UK, from Wales specifically, as you will be able to tell from his accent. So Willie and Scott are going to join us in a little while, but because one of them was in Canada and one of them was in Wales, and these are not in the same time zones, and Afnan is in somewhere in the exotic Far East, I think it's a country called Japan. Yeah, we decided to do this separately. We're going to edit and mash it all together in one great, video edit extravaganza. But in terms of what do you hope to get out of this, Afnan? What's the point in doing this one? What's our conversation about? What's the random archaeology we're trying to extract from you all?
I think that, for this one, I think it's really interesting for us to converse with different people from different backgrounds, not only country-wise, but also outlook on what they want to achieve from this particular MA that we all came together to do. And I think we've all come from different places. Maybe we studied something different in undergrad, or maybe we actually took some time out before coming to our MA, or just carried on directly from undergraduate. And I think that all of these aspects kind of link together to show that you're always ready for an MA. And it's just really, for me, I think it's really interesting to kind of hear about different people's approach to archaeology and what they thought about the MA at Chester, but MAs in general. So I think, yeah.
And the MA we're going to be discussing is the very distinctive, unique, actually, program, the MA Archaeology of Death and Memory. But hopefully some of our the issues we raise will be of relevance to those looking for MA programs elsewhere on very different subject areas. But I think, I think it's been interesting to see the range of people that this MA has attracted. Not only those interested in death and memory, but heritage and society and people with different disciplinary backgrounds from the sciences and the arts and the humanities. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And these are only 3, case studies. Your sort of case studies.
Yeah.
I like. Yeah. So let's kick off then, and I'll go over to have my interview with Scott and Willie, and I shall be back to talk to you at the end, Afnan.
Okay. Well, please enjoy yourselves, and I look forward to listening in.
So now we're joined by Scott Bound, who is in. Are you in Wales, Scott?
No, I'm actually still in Chester.
Are you
just
in
around the
Chester?
corner from the university.
Oh my word! Okay, well, from the wilds of Chester to North Wales, where I am, right the way across the Atlantic to Canada, where we have Willie Pohl, who's also another former MA student. Hi, Willie.
Hello. Good morning. Well, morning for me. I don't actually know what time it is there. Sorry.
I don't know what time it is anywhere anymore. It's the COVID times, as far as I'm concerned. It's all timey-wimey. But yeah, it's early evening here in the UK when we're doing the recording. But nice to have you join us, Willie, from all the way across there in Canada. And so Scott and Willie, can you give me some perspective? I've been obviously talking to Afnan about her take on masters. I mean, why did give you it's an introduction to each of yourselves and what you did before you did master's degrees here at the University of Chester, and maybe Willie first.
Sure. Yeah, so I am sort of a Métis, Anishinaabe, British mix, and so I have Indigenous ancestry that I'm very close to and very sort of involved in my culture. And so my undergraduate degree was actually in Indigenous studies, and a huge part of that was just trying to sort of relearn parts of my culture that had been broken through colonization and the residential school system and stuff like that. So after my undergraduate degree, I moved north in the Yukon where I wanted to live basically as close to the land and as natural as I could. So I lived in a tent frame, which, if you don't know what that is, it's basically a yurt. And I lived there for a few years with no running water, no electricity, and temperatures about minus 40 degrees Celsius in the winter. And I started working with the First Nation to kind of learn how to trap and hunt. And I started building educational programs for the First Nation where I lived. And so that was kind of my background. My huge passion was being a dog sledder and running a trap line via dog team, which was a super cool experience. And after about 3 years of living without any electricity or cell service or Netflix, I wanted to do something else for a little bit, and drastic change. I went to Chester to do a master's degree. So huge difference in lifestyle, place, and I guess part of it, like, for me, I've always been fascinated with like elder stories and oral traditions and sort of my culture, like my culture's archaeology. But there's been a huge like divide between researchers and Indigenous people. And so I wanted to kind of do a research project that was more focused on research for Indigenous people by Indigenous people. And at the same time, I also being half British, my grandparents are on my dad's side are from England, wanted to see kind of that genealogy and where I was from there. And so I packed up me and my little pug dog, and we both flew to England.
Oh, I never got to meet the hound. I must admit, I don't think I did anyway. Or did I? Did I meet the hound?
I don't know. I don't think she was allowed in Chester University.
Oh, that's a shame.
I think.
I love little pugs.
I know.
But that's interesting. So for the listeners' benefit, what was the rationale behind Chester of all places and the MA Archaeology of Death and Memory?
Yeah. So Chester specifically, like I had looked at other places, but when I looked at pictures of Chester and like reviews of Chester, it seemed like there were like smaller class sizes, and it was like a smaller like town or city. And obviously, like coming from the middle of nowhere where I had seen like a total of, I lived in a town of 200 people and I knew everyone. It was like, it would have been really nerve wracking, I think, to go to like flying into London was like absolute chaos, and the look on my dog's face, who she has only met like 6 people, and now, she's walking through the London airport was, I was like, yeah, Chester is definitely better for us. It just seemed like a closer kind of community, and like being that that's really important to me, it just was a huge attractor.
Well, thank you. That's interesting to hear. And of course, it's for the record. London does induce pug horror in almost everyone. Everyone who's entering it who's not used to a big city has that same sort of pug dog expression of, whoa. That's my experience anyway. Even though I grew up near London, it's too big a place for me. And yeah, we're a smaller historic city. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So what about you, Scott? What was your background before you came to do a master's at Chester?
So, well, I came from the wild of Wales, where you're residing right now, and I came up to do my undergraduate course in 2012, actually in Chester Uni as well. Yay. I did history and archaeology, and it was kind of, at the time, a little one of those spur-of-the-moment decisions of I thoroughly enjoy history and archaeology. At that time, not so much archaeology, but I was looking at, like, ancient history courses in like Leicester and these other cities and such, and I got captivated after watching a documentary by Alice Roberts, actually, weirdly enough. Yes, Origins of Us, I think it was called, and it really took me in, and like, the idea of the practical application of history, and also the unknown answers kind of like sucked me into the archaeological side of things. And I thought Chester, similarly so, was kind of a great space for it. I launched myself into Chester because it was not too far away from Wales, not too far away from the family, but also nowhere near as busy as Manchester or Liverpool or, God forbid, London. And, well, I found myself here. After doing that course, I kind of almost fell away from academia a little bit, in all honesty. It was overbearing for a good many years. It did overpower me almost because, well, I have ADHD, so it took quite a lot for me to be able to concentrate, organize myself, put myself into the mindset to be able to work and function in such a manner where you are putting yourself forward for that kind of work. So I kind of fell out of love with the idea of academia. And I spent 2 years doing odd jobs, primarily working in a bar, which you have been to a good few many times, I think, after seminars and such.
Yes, absolutely. Always for good academic reasons. Drinking as part of that. Oh, yes, of course.
Field studies.
Field studies.
Indeed. Well, yeah, after a while of doing that, I found myself just like in this mundane space, and I was like, I actually was completely and utterly missing this pushing of myself that I found myself doing in academia, this entire putting my head down, working on a project, figuring new things out, discovering new things and being part of a larger conversation, which in your undergraduate studies, you're not even really that much a part of. But when you go in to do a master's, as I found out from talking to lots of other people who I knew were doing masters or going into PhDs, you do focus yourself a lot more and you become part of this larger scale conversation because a lot of the work is, well, yours primarily.
That's really interesting. And you came back to do the MA Archaeology and Heritage Practice, if I recall.
Yeah, I came to do the Archaeology Heritage Practice, but I think it was either just me or 2 people who came to do the course. So we couldn't actually do it. So instead, I think it was you sent me an email back actually and said, look, this actually won't be going this year because
that's correct. Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you did do the MA Archaeology of Death and Memory because you'd wanted to do the heritage practice, but that particular year the uptake wasn't sufficient to make it a viable program. That's right. Which is really odd because now we it keeps flipping each year which is more popular, and you know we've got healthy last couple of years got really healthy intakes, but you know it's never quite clear where it's going to go. But we've never been in that situation since because it's sort of buoyed up more. But yeah. So you end up doing as Willie did. You did the MA Archaeology, Death and Memory, but you did have a particular interest in heritage that continued through, but we can talk about that in a little while. But I wanted to ask back to Willie, if I may, because one thing that Scott just mentioned is the jump from undergraduate studies to masters, you know, the change in the nature of the way you study, engage with the classes, engage with the work. What did you feel as a Canadian student in a different subject, Indigenous studies, jumping into an MA in archaeology, and a particular specialist type of archaeology too, Willie? What did you feel about that? Was it intimidating or challenging, or was it pretty straightforward?
So yeah, I took about 4 years off between my undergraduate and MA, and going into the MA, like I was really nervous because I was from such a different subject background. I definitely thought that I would be like 3 years behind, and I wasn't sure that if I'd be able to even do it. I was super nervous. I also come from like a background where my undergraduate is largely taught by Indigenous people, and it's like done in a very different way. Like we spend a lot of time outside, a lot of time with like elders, and a lot of our research is like community based.
Right.
It's just a little bit different than what you would be doing in a master's course. So I was nervous about that, and I think I was like expecting a lot of pushback. Like I was going into a program in a more colonial institution than what I was used to, and even in Canada, like there's a big divide.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of expecting pushback in how I did things or how I wrote, because I feel that I do write quite differently, and I do include like a lot of oral histories and stuff like that. So I was expecting that, but I actually didn't get any of that. I was actually really like relieved. Everything went super well. Like everyone was super easy to work with and super supportive, which is almost different than Canada. The divide was almost less in England than it was in Canada, which was really interesting for me.
That's really interesting.
Yeah,
obviously we went out of our way to be as mean to Canadians as possible, as particularly Indigenous people. No, seriously, no. It's really good to hear that, because you obviously knew you were coming from a different background and a different experiences, and coming to this new. And the course is trying to serve undergraduate archaeology students who are making the progression, but also students coming from cognate areas such as anthropology, Indigenous studies. So that's obviously assuring to hear. But were there any staying with that? Was there anything that surprised you that you hadn't anticipated?
I don't think so. Like it was really great. I had been kind of doing some research for the nations that I'd worked for previously. So I was like working kind of in an academic field previously. So I had been doing a lot of writing. And so I was kind of like really prepared to start writing and focusing on that, which is kind of what I love. It's one of my passions. That was really good. The biggest challenge was like moving my dog across the pond, trying to find a pet-friendly place, and all of that was really challenging. Working in a new place was challenging, and working and doing a master's at the same time was kind of a little bit challenging. I feel like I definitely could have, if I had more time to dedicate, it would have been a little bit easier too. But those are just like regular challenges. I don't think anything. Yeah, but I think it was, everyone was like super supportive, more so than in the Canadian university I went to. So that was good.
Fantastic. No, obviously I was joking about we're very much aware that in your year we had a particularly eclectic range of US, Canadian, even the Welsh were allowed in that year. So but seriously,
no crossbow wounds that year.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's interesting but seriously, it's an interesting point about colonial, because of course Chester is built on colonial, multiple stages of different kinds of colonialism, from the Romans through to the Anglo-Saxons, the Normans, and so on. But of course, that's not the kind of colonialism you were specifically referring to. But still, it's a city with those deep roots of different kinds, and in a region with Irish immigration, Welsh immigration, and a whole multicultural pot of its own little making. But someone coming into that from a Canadian situation, though, it must be. I'm glad that we were accommodating and that it wasn't quite so horrific. But of course, I'm very sad to hear only after the fact that the dog related, the canine aspect of all this, that was very challenging. But I mean, for both of you, what would you identify, do you think, hand on heart, and with an eye to think, with a thought to other people thinking of doing a master's degree, whether it's at Chester or elsewhere, what do you think went badly for you, and what, how would you have done that, dealt with it differently, if anything? Don't know who wants to answer that first, Scott.
For me personally, when I started off, I find myself getting quite lost often. Yeah. Just because when you start off, and like I said before, that jump from undergrad to postgrad, and especially with me having 2 years out, it was like you were lost in the dark a little bit, and you were trying to scramble to find where the light was. After a while, you found your footing and such, but that was through, and it's one of those ones of like, you have to be a particular kind of person to be able to ask for help from people, but it's one of the best ways you can do things. And you were my PAT that year, weren't you, Howard? And like, to begin with, I don't think I asked you that many questions, but as the year went by, like, I just continued, and it was like, eventually it was going from like bi-monthly to weekly to daily to hourly, and eventually then I felt like I'd gone from this stumble in the dark towards a sprint. But that was one of my main issues, I think I remember. But the other one, as Willie said before, is juggling doing a master's alongside work, because I was working not only in that bar I mentioned beforehand, doing like one shift, maybe 2 a week, just to try and make ends meet, but I was also working with a heritage company in Chester too, who I still work with. And juggling all of that, it does raise anxiety.
Sure.
And trying to live a life outside of that as well. It gets stressful, and I actually ended up having panic attacks and issues with anxiety towards the end. But I was able to. That was like 3/4 of the way into the year before I started the dissertation, really, or when I was just getting started on the dissertation. And then you get into this process of being able to juggle it properly, so long as, again, you ask for help and you realize where your priorities need to be. And my priorities were at that time towards academia, so I could get my studies finished. I was very proud of the work that I'd done, so I wanted to continue on my path, and I put a bit of a back burner on some of the work that I was doing, knowing that towards the end I can always go back to it was work anyway. Just it did make it a bit stressful with cash.
Willie, what would you? Thank you, Scott. Willie, what would you consider in that regard as the things that didn't go so well? Or
well, I think like one of the things that was like nerve-wracking is, you know, not coming from an archaeology background, I often would find I was like spending a lot of time Googling like some of the academic language used in a reading. And so like half my time would be like Googling words to figure out what they mean and then putting them together so I could understand it. And then trying to write that way. So it was like vastly different in that way. But I think that was just, definitely part of it and a learning curve. I think I was definitely more anthropology like focused. And so a lot of the kind of more archaeology focused stuff was challenging, but I found that there was like such a bridge between them that you could very easily be from an anthropology background and do the course, which was really like a relief for me, I think. Other than that, I think just regular, you know, making friends, being in a new place, and the cost of living is much higher than in Canada where I'm from. So that was interesting. I feel like I probably should have taken a better like financial management course before I went.
Oh gosh, yes. Well, we don't have any yurt options around Chester that I'm aware of, anyway. But no, seriously, it's. But no, it's I mean, in terms of, the course challenges with the course, that's, I think, are really fair and helpful to hear from two different perspectives. Can I ask you both then what you felt you enjoyed most or went best about the MA? Maybe Scott again.
Yeah, I'll go first again. No trouble. So what went like well? As I was saying, really was kind of before that level of, in comparison to your undergraduate, the self kind of personal study, really. You were able to kind of go with exactly what you wanted to do. There was a mass variety of different modules. You had like there was mortuary archaeology, you had archaeology of the body, landscapes, of course heritage was my preference.
Yes.
And all of those were able to piece together, especially from somebody who wasn't meant to be doing the death and memory module. It was able to work really well with the kind of heritage focus that I wanted to do, especially considering two of the modules are very heritage based. For me, the ability to kind of see archaeology within the world of heritage was the best kind of application for me personally, because
That's really interesting.
With archaeology of the body and mortuary archaeology, that's almost a base within all forms I've found as time's gone by from exterior study. Like it all, although you're looking at landscapes and phenomenology personally within that, people specifically, especially the public in my kind of field that I've now work, bubbles down towards death a lot of the time.
Really?
People want to know the gory details. They want to know how people die, what we find out from the dead, but then also, with the other modules too, landscapes. Now I'm going on a train journey back home to Wales and I'm looking at the fields and I'm going, okay, there's ridge and furrow systems over there. I can see from all of these different hedgerows how that's changed over time. Like if you go to Yorkshire and you look at the different ways in which dry stone walls are set out, your brain starts ticking, and it changes the way in which you yourself perceive the environment around you, as well as just the world in which you live in, and how that changes social structures, economies, cultural elements, as well as divides, especially in the modern day. But for me, I found that personal study was really good. I found myself often going down rabbit holes and like wrong paths, and as you do, like you'll find yourself reading one article where you just V-line completely because you just find the topic interesting. But then no matter what that does is that expands your knowledge and your own ability personally. Like I was saying before, I learned how to ask for help quite a lot, and the incredible staff and was able to assist with that there from the great Howard Williams and co.
Okay. It's not just it's a lot of us. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, of course, just compliments, please.
No.
Well, yeah. The Uni of Chester, the Archaeology and History department is just incredible. It's super friendly as well, which is my kind of way in which I would like to approach things, like professional meets approachable.
Yeah.
And well, like I say, again, with the personal independent study, it made me a lot more capable after I came out of university within the world, working and or personal wise as well.
Fantastic. And you did get to pursue your heritage aspect through to your dissertation, didn't you, Scott?
Absolutely, yes. So my dissertation was primarily on intangible cultural heritage, which was really what I wanted to do from the start, and I didn't know. Like I said, when I started my undergrad, I kind of went history and archaeology because I was like history, but I want to do practical history. Because coming where I come from, a small village called Carnham in the middle of Wales, there's not really much going on there, but people do have a pride, especially my nan, that's the Welsh word for nan. She both rammed it down my throat and also would always talk about the Celts, open quotations, and how we resisted the Saxons and the English, and these larger tales of the Red Dragon and how mythology meets into actual history, and that was something which I thoroughly enjoyed. And then when I got to uni, I realised that the way in which you'd utilise that, as Willie was saying before, was through the specific language that is used in the archaeological spiel is heritage. And then for me, I realize as time goes by that it's not the buildings and this tangible heritage that's around, which like landscapes does teach you, but instead a lot of it for me personally was the phenomenology, the intangible cultural heritage. And I was able to utilize, because I like the different languages that people talk, the way in which that people create things, oral histories, tales, mythology. That was my specific kind of love. And I remember in my undergraduate, I looked into like Arthurian legend and Robin Hood and how that has an impact in many varieties of modern tales and perspectives, but also that bled into, of course, the dissertation for my master's degree, where we ended up looking at modern intangible cultural heritage in North Wales and how tourism is almost a modern form of pilgrimage. And we went on our own little adventure, didn't we, around old dolmen tombs and sacred wells. It was a lovely little trip where we got to look at forms of graffiti and etchings people had made, ash deposits in certain environments, especially with Beth Gellert, and how people utilize old tales still within the modern day, looking at druids going to Brinkelly Dee.
Oh, yes.
And still like the solar alignments that people utilize, like Stonehenge Festival, and people, modern druids and Wiccans and all people from these different communities utilizing their own twist on historic morphed to modern practices and ideologies and viewpoints, which leads their everyday life, and these really cool practices which give a nice flavor towards humankind.
Fantastic. So you're well. You still seem enthusiastic. Not that many people feel quite so enthusiastic after they finished an exhausting piece of master's level dissertation research. But I'm glad that at least after a bit of a break, you feel engaged with that again. Because
I needed to have at least a good 6 months, I think, afterwards for a quick breather, definitely. But yeah, it's still a love there, definitely.
And there seems a lot linking what you said. Seems a lot of connectivity to what Willie's perspective on things was. But I'm interested, Willie. What would your answer be to that question about what particularly went well and in particular in terms of thinking about how that fed into your dissertation?
For sure. I think that Scott probably said it much more like elegantly than I will. But for me, it was like inspirational. Like I hadn't really, maybe it was because it was like a new subject to me, but it felt like the more time I spent with people in the department and, the more like lessons that we went through, the more that like ideas of research in my own culture were triggered. And I was like constantly being inspired of like new projects and how we could combine archaeology for like the benefit of Indigenous communities. And so like things like that I would have never really thought past. Like I have always loved the pictographs where I'm from, which is of Mishipishu, the underwater panther, or the underwater lynx. And I would have never really thought much about that. And it kind of forced me to think about it in like landscape, like what is the surrounding area? Like it just, you take a deeper dive into things that you wouldn't previously have done. And I think like I came to a lot of conclusions of how archaeology can be benefiting Indigenous communities in terms of like even Inuit face tattoos and kind of, there are a lot of people who practice Inuit face tattoos still, and we're still finding, bodies in ice and able to tell what their tattoos used to be. And we're kind of combining archaeology with cultural revitalization. And it's a really, really cool thing to see and to have kind of been like sparked a passion for. And yeah, so I think for me, it forced me to think about things in a more in-depth way. It gave me the time to kind of come to those ideas on my own, because if you're not forcing yourself to spend time on something, you're probably not doing it. So when you're actually in the course, you're constantly thinking in a different way than you normally would be. And I was able to access great ideas that I never thought I would have. So.
Fantastic. Well, if I can stay with Willie for the final question I wanted to ask each of you, but is what do you do now? What happened afterwards? I haven't caught up with either of you for a little while. I've had sort of snippets of information via different sources, but what happened next for you, Willie?
For sure. So I am back in Canada. I spent a couple years. Well, I do quite a few things right now. I teach high school courses, which has been really cool. And I've actually gotten to like teach some archaeology courses at the high school, which has been like awesome. And we do a lot of like going out to see different pictograph sites. And yeah, it's really cool. And I sort of worked in a lot of what I learned about like gender through archaeology. And that was a huge fascinating subject, because here, like Indigenous people, we have two-spirit people. And so like revitalizing the spirituality and the culture around two-spirit people has been a really, really cool thing to kind of combine both my passions for. I also work in Indigenous entrepreneurship. So I teach Indigenous entrepreneurship courses across Canada to different First Nations. And I have 2 children's books coming out within the next year. Both. Yeah, it's kind of exciting. I'm also writing like a young adult fiction novel on Indigenous. It's like Indigenous archaeology based, which will be really exciting. But my children's books are mostly, one touches on missing and murdered Indigenous women, which is a kind of a big issue in Canada. And the other is an environmental focused Indigenous book. And I work for the Moose Tide campaign, so I design and build curriculum around violence against Indigenous women and children, and that I kind of work with youth all across Canada to do that, which is really exciting. And I've also took a course to be an Indigenous doula, where I combine a lot of archaeology to revitalize Indigenous birthing practices, which is one of my biggest passions currently.
Wow.
Well, so not much really then. No, it's fantastic. And so, I mean, I feel I should, given since we last talked, so much has happened in the international news from Canada about Indigenous rights and Indigenous news. What is the climate there now? I mean, is it okay to ask that? I mean, is it?
Yeah.
What's your feeling? Is it easy? I mean, maybe it's not easy to synopsize so much is going on, but I mean, what's the feeling right now with everything? Is it a time of hope or a time of real struggle for Indigenous people?
Well, recently in the past like 2 months, we started doing actually archaeologists have been doing work to find out the burial sites for residential schools.
Yes.
And this is the first time that this work has been done. Like, it's largely unmarked graves. And the government always fought with Indigenous people about how many children died at residential schools. And so the last one only closed in 1996. But recently, in the last 2 months, that's been huge in the news because they've found a way to find children without having to dig. And so we're at over 6,000 children found right now. And so the current climate is really interesting. Like, it is a constant struggle, and Canada has a lot of issues with its Indigenous people. But I think that like more Indigenous people are going into academics and kind of changing things from the inside, so to speak. And so I think, like Indigenous people right now are hugely on the rise. They're regaining their economy, regaining culture, regaining practices. And yeah, I'm really excited and like hopeful for the future. And I think that, right now it's, as like a country, Indigenous people are grieving the children that have been found and the stories around it. And, almost everyone I know who's Indigenous either went to residential school or is the child of somebody who went to residential school. So it's a really relevant issue. But it's been really interesting climate in Canada right now. There's some change for the good, and I think when Truth and Reconciliation Act, truth is the first part of it, and I think that we're finally getting to that point. So.
I thank you for sharing that with us, because I think that is I could not go on without asking about that, and thank you. And I suppose, back to Scott, what have you been doing since you finished your MA? Was it 3 years now or 4 years?
I think it was 3 years. Was it 3 years, Willie?
2018, was it?
Yeah, 2018. Yeah. I finished my undergrad in 2015. 2 years, 2018. Yeah. Well, now I've followed that entire heritage kind of passion, and I work in Chester and a lot of the Northwest with a non-profit organisation called Big Heritage, who do work with the Uni of Chester. And I was, like I said, doing part-time work with them when I was doing my undergrad too. But it's all kind of come to a lovely fruition now, because I'm able to utilize a lot of the skills that I did gain during uni within my work, as by the sounds Willie did too, because, well, we've opened up a museum in the centre of Chester, which couldn't open up because of lockdown for a good long while.
Yes, of course.
But it's a medical museum looking at the history of medicine, disease, and surgery. So it's a little bit gruesome, quite interactive, which is my more tactile preferred learning way of learning. Performative, interactive, and silly too, but also educational too. Being a museum, it's called Sick to Death, and it's very topical for right now, everything considering, and it makes a little bit of a nice, let's say, light-hearted but tonally appropriate approach towards disease in the modern day and historically, to give people a bit of perspective and realize how it's not so bad nowadays, and we're really, really good that we've got things like vaccinations and X-rays, going down to even early things as modern or early surgeries conducted by barber surgeons and such like that.
Sure.
But as well looking into some of the archaeology and osteoarchaeology specifically in that site. But with that company too, I'm able to, we do some school visits, we do things in the local community as well to promote history and archaeology. I'm sure everyone's aware of the Pokemon Go event that we had in the middle of Chester, which caused some chaos, but it was an absolute takeoff.
Fantastic.
Absolutely, and now we have taken over the Diva Roman experience, now the Diva Discovery Centre, which has some of the only parts of properly exposed archaeology within Chester that's covered up. Well, it's got a roof over it, where you can see layers going from Roman through till early medieval, late medieval, and Georgian, with an entire Georgian cellar intact as well. And it gives me an excuse to dress up in my fantastical gear. I was trying out my first Roman gear today,
I knew this would all be about. Your whole career is leading to this moment. Yeah.
I was waiting for this. Well, I had to take a little bit of a. We had to take a break from all of my Viking reenactment as well, of course, because of the pandemic. And shows have just started up again. But now I can finally do it, walking children to the middle of Chester, screaming "Sin, Dex, Sin," and annoying some locals.
Oh, what would your nine say about you dressing up as a colonizer? Woo!
Oh, she would have a
down
go. Don't worry. But she's become a lot happier because I've taken away my dreadful beard, as she would have referred to it as.
But, oh, that sounds wonderful. What fun. What fun. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, obviously you've had a massive hit from the COVID crisis, pandemic, lockdown situation, but things are on the up for you as well then in terms of the heritage.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's just nice because for me personally, being such a, well, as I think I had a discussion with somebody once, they said that archaeologists are obsessed with the dead, so they don't like to deal with the living. Whereas I am 100% a people person, and I like chewing people's ears off about anything and everything that I know to do with history and heritage. So when it comes towards, well, secondary schools and primary schools, a lot the case nowadays, and if not as well, especially in Sick to Death, because I do work on the front as well, dressed often as either a barber surgeon or some form of monk in the form of Brother Scott. I get to shock people and astonish them with medical facts and that of all history, because I have my forum for it, so I get to bother and enlighten in my own, well, preferable way.
So if there is, thank you so much, Scott. So if there's any sort of final takeaway thoughts either of you have for listeners, if they're thinking of doing it, MA, or what type of things should they perhaps think about, reflect on, what would you say? And that's a bit of a tough question. I didn't really prepare you for, but we don't have take a minute to think about it.
I'd say do it, so long as you've got the cash and you know that you've got the attention span for it. Because no matter what, you will grow and develop. But again, like, it can be a stressful circumstance. But if you're looking to better yourself, grow as a person, find new communities of stuff you're interested in, and, well, develop skills for both in academic work and the wider world, it's a perfect chance to be able to do that and make your own voice heard within a community of, well, professionalism, I guess, of academia.
Thank you, Scott. So no one would deny that it's a massive outlay of time, energy, stress, money, but there are those benefits too. What about yourself, Willie? What would you say?
I would definitely say, like, just do it. It's really exciting. Like, it's not a huge chunk of time. Like, I feel like, in Canada, like, master's programs are like almost always 2 years.
Okay.
And so for me, that was another like huge attractive of going to the UK, is that you can do it in a year. And it was like one of the best years and best experiences I decided to do. I think you'll just like keep an open mind, be ready to learn, and try and absorb as much as you can, and bring what you learned back to what you're passionate about, and it'll be yeah, it'll be fine. It'll work out. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you very much, both of you. It certainly was a joy and a
Cool.
privilege to teach both of you when you were, and supervise you a little bit as well. And I must say that I have to say that I thoroughly enjoy teaching undergraduates. But let's just say it's the crowning, both privilege and fun to have a master's cohort such as you guys to teach as well. And I really enjoyed teaching on the master's programs, and you were great. It was really fun. I learned a lot. I'm still learning a lot from the experiences of teaching on the masters, but also I must admit, before this interview, I hadn't quite gathered all the exciting things both of you went on to do. As I said, I heard rumors and stuff, but no one always tells me these things. So it was a real eye opener. And so, yeah, wow, I'm not worthy. It's really impressive. And just keep doing what you're doing and stay in touch, because this is only the beginning, isn't it? The COVID's got in the way, but so really since you graduated, it was only a year of real world time before everything's gone into the crazy times. But hopefully we're pulling back out of that, and I just can't wait to hear more about what you get up to, both of you.
Absolutely, yeah, and happily so. I think work is actually opening up Big Heritage Press as well, so I might even be doing some writing too. So you never know, I might be in contact there. But as well with you, Willie, that's amazing to hear what you're up to. That's so good, and from when we talked during our masters, exactly where you kind of wanted to be. So proud of you and very happy as well.
Aw, thanks, Scott. It's been
No
super
worries, man.
lovely catching up. It's also been super lovely to hear like your guys' accents again. I played learn for that. So that's
Whoa,
really
whoa!
nice.
What accent? What accent?
The Savin one.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's lovely to hear yours as well. It's nice to.
Absolutely.
And I know Willie, you're in the middle of driving across the entire nation, so I should let you get back on the road. And thank you both for your time. And I'm going to move on to talk to Afnan and see what some of her answers to these questions are.
No trouble.
For sure. I'm gonna head out and hopefully drive a little bit more today. But thank you both so much. It was really lovely, and definitely stay in touch.
So we're back to Afnan now, having talked to Scott and Willie. And it would be really cool to hear your thoughts on the MA Archaeology, Death and Memory, Afnan. So you'd done your undergraduate degree. We discussed those in previous episodes.
Yeah.
Why do an MA at Chester? Why not leave us after the trauma of having to be taught by us all? No, but seriously, what made you stay on to do the MA Archaeology, Death and Memory?
Honestly, I think that while I managed to successfully avoid all of your classes in undergraduate, I think I wanted something a little bit more from you, Howard. So I, all jokes aside, I do think that the MA sounded very interesting to me, and I really wanted to kind of indulge myself into a world of archaeology that was kind of free to talk about my interests in archaeology and tie them into the death and memory aspects. And I think that death and memory can encompass so many different things, and the modules that were available on the course were actually very interesting on my part. I really found it enticing, and I wanted to explore them a little bit further, and I wanted to learn a lot more. So after I finished my undergraduate, honestly, I didn't feel like a fully fledged archaeologist. I felt like I had coasted through, and I was like, okay, well, I'm finished, but I've learned a lot. But I guess my urge to, seek knowledge was just, I needed something more. And I think that the MA, the Archaeology of Death and Memory, really kind of engaged me to learn that extra aspect of archaeology, of a side that I didn't really have a chance to I guess capture at undergraduate. It was like a next step for me. And I think I didn't want to just leave uni, because I know that a lot of the times people say, oh yeah, I'll come back, and then you kind of get caught up in life and then you don't come back. And I wanted to learn more. I wanted to do more. So I guess that's why I went directly from my undergraduate to my master's. I wasn't ready to finish studying. I wasn't ready to kind of end it at that note. And I think I just really enjoyed the topic itself, the archaeology of death and memory, because we do have at Chester University, there are many different MA topics. But I think this one was one that really captured me, and I really thought that I would enjoy it, and I did. It was really great. So like, yeah, I guess.
So can you give, from your perspective, what really struck you about the content or the workload or the character of a master's versus an undergraduate degree? Was it a step up in terms of, or was it just a change in content, or did, you know, how did it all play out for you?
So I think with an MA, while it might seem like you have less classes, and of course it's only a year, but I think the amount of time and effort and understanding that you have to put into your MA is significantly more than an undergraduate. You are expected to have a lot more knowledge and do a lot more research. It's not an undergraduate degree, so you do need to really step yourself up both in essay writing, but research skills, and like it's also preparing your assignments in advance. So the workload was, I would want to say, on a similar level, but the amount of effort you have to actually put into your work is significantly more, and you want to put that effort in. So there's that with the workload. In terms of like the topic differences, so the topics, like I said, I didn't actually have any of your classes, but I think the whole point of this MA was that you can approach death and memory from any angle that you want. So whereas I feel like with undergraduate, it's like, of course, you can bring in case studies that are relevant, but your topic is fairly specific. Whereas with this MA and with maybe any MA, you have a very broad, a very vague kind of outline, and you can bring in whatever you want to that. So it's really about what you're interested in, and you can talk about whatever you want to talk about as long as it's about death and memory. So yeah, I think like in terms of topics, it was broad, but of course it was still very specific towards the aspects of death and memory.
And what did you end up doing your master's dissertation on? It was very different from your undergraduate prehistoric rock art stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was very different. Actually, my MA dissertation, it was a combination of the understanding of like cremations and death, but portrayed through animation and through anime. And so I'm a big anime fan, or I guess I should say I don't have time anymore to watch it. But especially very, there are really significant moments in animation where death is portrayed, obviously, and of course the story goes that way. And I think that depending on the story of that anime, or even the manga, I think I did touch on.
Yes, you did. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you can find a lot of interesting, like aspects of death. So is it okay if I share some examples?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so like for example, there is One Piece. One Piece is a story basically about the main character. I'm gonna just very vaguely describe. I'm gonna say that pirates. Essentially, that's kind of the overview, and they're saying goodbye to their ship. And it's really interesting because in this context, they take on a very what we would consider, I guess, like I want to say Viking burial. It's the ship in the sea. It's burning. It's like, your, I guess, stereotypical, oh, it's a Viking burial type thing. And that's very specific to One Piece. Whereas in others, maybe Grave of the Fireflies, for example, this was a really a very good movie by Studio Ghibli, and it's a very sad movie. I do recommend watching it, but it touches on cremation and the aspect of loss of creation and cremation and how that can tie into loss, but self-being and beauty almost. So I really wanted to express the differences of how the context of each animation can portray death and can portray memory in many different ways. And it does use archaeological like influences to portray that. So I thought it was a very interesting topic, but maybe not so much.
No, definitely much. Lots of intersection between archaeology, contemporary media, entertainment, and how these historical themes play out with mythological and historical references. So I thought it was fascinating, and yes, and really shows how the MA is a good example, I think, of how the MA allows students to pursue interdisciplinary themes in which material culture and landscape and the material world is represented in a fictional world can be a very sort of important way of reflecting on how archaeology percolates contemporary society and the way people pick it up, not simply through documentaries and museums, but actually through a whole range of rich, varied media. So yeah, I thought it was really cool, and you know, but you were able to pursue whole areas that were very different from your undergraduate studies, so it wasn't a repeat in any regard then, Afnan. There was no overlap really.
Not really, no. And actually I do want to say that my undergraduate, especially, I think we spoke about this in Let's Talk Archaeology 3, the conference really inspired me to kind of mix of media. So animation and manga, using contemporary art and contemporary archaeology in my master's degree. And I think that you can really get inspired in your undergraduate to then bring it into your MA and kind of make a topic your own. So yeah, definitely not a repeat, just inspiration.
So what went well and what went badly during your MA, do you think, overall?
I do love this question. Because, so I'll start with what went well. Let's always start on a positive note.
Yes, let's do that.
I think that what went well with archaeology, there are several things. So based on my degree, I think that I learned to express myself in archaeological terms and in archaeological means in a much wider and a more professional manner. I think that I was able to learn a lot more from you and from the other lecturers that also took part in the course. It's nice to kind of be respected as an archaeologist doing an MA rather than being an undergraduate. It is a different feel. While your lecturers are still your friends in undergraduate, they are your lecturers, they are your professors. I felt like during my MA, it was very much like you're old enough and you have enough understanding to do this on your own. So come to us if you need anything. And it was a very like nice and professional kind of connection almost between you and your lecturers. So I think what went well was that I learned to be very independent and use my skills from my undergraduate to become independent in my MA, and to not go running off to my lecturers and be like, oh, help me, I don't know what to do, because I should know what to do. And even when I came across a bump or I was unsure, they of course are always there, but the MA level really gives you that confidence and that power to become a better archaeologist. And I think that I learned a lot more in in my self-confidence, but also as an archaeologist myself, I learned how to do research. I learned how to do things on a different level.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I think so too. In terms of what went badly, so honestly, I think at the time it was more of a personal situation. I was working a lot during my MA, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, although as I know, sometimes it's necessary to work during an MA. So I think that I would have wanted to put in a lot more effort. I always say this, I think I said this about my undergraduate. I wish I had done more. I wish I had kind of gone into it with a better outlook maybe, or a more, not necessarily positive, because my outlook was very positive, but just spent more time in the library, spent more time reading books, and kind of used the resources I had a little bit better, kind of spoken to maybe you more, spoken to the lecturers more, kind of taken their idea, because I think that if I had, maybe I would have been more inclined to maybe look for PhDs afterwards. One, to become a professor or a doctor. A professor is very difficult. Maybe just have a doctorate in my archaeology, and maybe I would be pursuing a career in archaeology today. There are lots of maybes, and I guess that's not a negative thing that I don't have a job in archaeology, but I do think after doing my MA, I did have a very strong love for archaeology as a subject. And I do wish that I had put in a little bit more effort. So I guess that's just a personal thing rather than what was negative about the MA, because I can't really think of anything that was detrimentally terrible, because it all flowed really well. It was easy to keep up with. There was nothing too, as if too much pressure was put on us. So it was very independent, I guess.
But I suppose that what you're saying is that it's, you doing an undergraduate degree is a massive amount of time, money, and resources, and part-time work keeps people afloat to some degree. The same applies for an MA, and it's a really difficult thing. You say that's a personal thing. It's a reality for many people. It's just it's a lot of debt and a lot of money and a lot of so I don't think that's your unique and only personal failing to have faced that problem or challenge. I think this is a bigger issue about that whole challenge of balancing up, which is why some people do go away, work for a couple of years and come back and do an MA. But that, as you say, doesn't suit other people, and they never do it because once they've jumped into work, they don't want to go back. And it's so, I have a lot of sympathy with students who have to do that balancing act of doing a lot of part-time work to just keep themselves going, and it does make you frustrated. I remember you saying how frustrated you were that it took time away from the things you wanted to do, having the part-time work to allow you to do what you want to do. So but it's done, and you did well, and you jumped off into literally swam around the world. I mean, flew around the world to work in a new field. I mean, so can you give us an idea of what you're up to now? I think you may have mentioned it in a previous episode, but perhaps a little bit more, Afnan.
Of course, I think so. Currently, and I have said this before, I use my degree every day in everything that I do. And at the moment, I'm in Japan. I'm actually teaching English. So this is something that I think many people can do, and many people do. Sorry.
We do.
Yeah. After they graduate university, undergrad, or even their MAs. So I was teaching English to all levels, all groups. It's really interesting because you kind of learn English in a different way to how we learn English in the UK. Teaching it as a second language is very different. You get posed with questions and you're like, oh wait, yeah, I'm a teacher. I need to know that grammatical point. So that's what I was doing. But now I'm actually working in schools, and I work for it's kind of, I guess in the UK, what would be year 7 to year 9. In Japan, they call it junior high school. That's what I'm doing. So I've got that going on. It's very interesting, very different culture, a very different, just everything from the UK. Like there is almost nothing that is the same. So it's very enlightening actually, and it just adds to, I guess, my knowledge. And I don't know, I know it sounds really cheesy, but I do really want to say that like every time I encounter something new about culture or just in general, I'm always like, oh yeah, I remember that archaeology is like everything's different and you have to take it with stride. It's not that different and bad, it's just different, and that's always good. So you just have to learn. And that's what I'm doing. I'm learning, because after 2 years, almost 2 years being here, I'm learning, and you become accustomed to it. But every day is like a whole entire new thing. So you learn something new every day.
Fantastic. Thank you, Afnan. And we're going to talk again about other things, I'm sure, in future Let's Talk Random Archaeology episodes. We've got various ideas on, brewing about potential topics. But for now, given that we've, I've talked to 3 people in one long stint,
Yeah.
I think we should, wrap this up. But thank you so much for your ongoing support and insights. And thanks to Willie and Scott too for joining us earlier.
Yeah.
And I hope this is not the final one, and we're going to have some more episodes coming soon. But for all our listeners, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. It's excellent. Please enjoy.